Okay, we are live. Paul, it's lovely to meet you. I'm here today with Paul Raci, and my goodness, I am intimidated. I really am. Because for those who are listening, Paul Raci has been nominated for an Oscar for The Sound of Metal, a film I saw the other night, which I have to say, for those of you who know me, I have begun to step into the deaf community and hopefully going to do some good work there. But that film really opened my ears fully to another world. What I've realized is I know so little. And Paul, that's really what the purpose of these conversations are. As we go on, I'm going to ask you different things. But obviously, congratulations being nominated.
Thank you.
I've Googled you a fair bit. I've listened to different interviews with you. I've looked at your track record, which is impressive, obviously. 21 nominations, 18 wins, I think it is.
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
And what draws me to you is part of me feels I know you. And I think it's because you have an ease about you. And maybe there's something, I know you're in America and you're American, but I feel coming from London that there's something about the type of person you are that I know and that I trust.
I'm just old, Janie. That's all. That's
Maybe
all.
because I'm getting old as well, but I think The Sound of Metal, along with this book, which has been a great learning for me, Mother, Father, Death.
Right.
We had the pleasure of talking with Paul the other week, Paul
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
and I feel much as Mother, Father, Death is a seminal book, The Sound of Metal is lifting the lid on um, a lot of issues that need to be raised out there about the inclusion of the deaf community and also the deaf culture.
Hmm.
Because from my side, what I've realised is I know so little. I thought I was getting to know a little bit more, and the conversations with people like you who have grown up, if you like, in between two worlds. Coda, for people who are listening, Coda, children of deaf adults. Paul, that's where I'd like to start.
Hmm.
Because when you grew up, no internet, no Google, no services on computers, you were plunged right into that space in between. Can you share with us a little bit about your parents and your upbringing?
Oh, certainly. And I appreciate you admitting that you hardly know anything about this world, which it's. I mean, it's really no fault of your own. It's just that the world just seems to ignore the deaf, as we, you know. Um, Growing up in the 50s in Chicago, when I think about it now, it seems like everything was in black and white at that time. The color wasn't invented yet. Everything was just black and white, even the TV. There was no captioning for movies. There was no devices to, there was no interpreting profession for sign language interpreters. So as a little boy at the age of 6 or 7, um, first of all, my parents were told not to have children by their families. Don't have children because you won't be able to take care of them. So what did my parents do? They went and had four of them, uh, and they immediately. My earliest recollection is my father bringing home this 78 RPM record player with a stack of 78 RPM records of Frank Sinatra, the Spike Jones band, a radio, a television. The television was on, the radio was on top of the refrigerator. They were both still on talking. I couldn't reach the radio to turn it off because it was too high. I, I mean, so I started speaking at a pretty early age, but I was signing first. Your first sign is milk, milk the cow for the milk. That's it. So that's your first inkling, and then it moves on from there. But uh, at a very early age, I was put in the middle of negotiations for a mortgage. Uh, and my father had to pay the rent for where the deaf club was. I'm dealing with the hearing man and the deaf man. And what does the hearing man say to this little 6 or 7 year old boy? He says, don't interpret this. This is just between you and I. And I look up at him. I tell my dad, he told me to stop interpreting because it's just between him and me. And my dad says, well, you're not going to do that. So I said, I'm not going to do that. So it's that kind of world. Like, he's less than. He's not in this. You can hear, so you're more important than your father. I learned quickly that that's the same way people that sit in wheelchairs are spoken to when they come up to a restaurant. Somebody's behind pushing a wheelchair. What does the maitre d' say? A table for how many? Not to the wheelchair person, but to the able-bodied person. And I grew up in Chicago. I just want to be totally honest with you, Janie. When Chicago was a very deeply divided racially city, black against white, white against black. My grandparents were absolutely racists, bigots, and they threw around that N word like you drink water. And so as a little boy, I hear my grandfather, my uncles talking about the N word. They're other than us. They are something to be dreaded. And so as a little boy, I might have been about 7. My mother was an avid lip reader, by the way. I was talking to somebody and I used the word, and out of nowhere, my mother's hand just came right across my mouth, she slapped me. And those are the days when you beat your children, and that was the way it was. Yeah. Spare the rod, spoil the child. And I said, wow, what the? She says, yeah, I saw what you said. If you want to use that N word, call me an N word, because it means you're less than. So if you want to throw that word around, throw it around about your mother and your father. So I learned very quickly from my mother how wrong that was, how destructive that was. So it was a lesson I never forgot. But I still grew up in a racially divided city that and all the deaf people I knew still used, my father used, there's a sign for the N word, He used that sign because his brothers used it. But in the deaf club, I said to my father one time, there's a black guy at the bar, right? And my father said, oh, he's not really black, he's deaf. So you see the mindset of us and them and us and ours, and they're not to be trusted. But, oh no, he's black, but he's deaf. There was a gay guy. The very same night, there was a gay guy at the bar. And I was Roman Catholic. I was an altar boy. I said to my mother, I know that Larry's gay, but I thought that, in my school, my Catholic school, I know that's wrong. They talk about, She says, no, he's deaf. I mean, this is insanity. Yeah. The separation.
And the labeling.
The labeling and the absolute teaching of bigotry. So the deaf community may be insulated, or they may be isolated as they are, but they certainly have all the foibles that hearing people have, including racism, including, separatism. All this stuff is baked in. But that's what was so wonderful about Sound of Metal. People would say to me, deaf people would say, wow, you showed deaf addicts. Oh my goodness. Because usually deaf people are portrayed as, very holy, would never do anything bad. They're saintly. They're portrayed as the comic relief. They're never real people in movies. And here we are with a movie. We have a deaf sober house. Oh my goodness gracious. They have addictions. Oh my God. Well, that's what's eye-opening. That they're as able-bodied as any people on this earth. They just can't hear. So what they need is that somebody to bridge that gap, so to speak, to show and prove to you that they're not, I think it was Aristotle or Plato, one of those smart Greek philosophers, who said, well, they're not capable of learning. Of course not. They're mute, they're deaf. So all that ridiculousness. And so when you grow up, as I grew up, and now the Vietnam War comes along, and I'm going to fast forward, and I got drafted. I got drafted, and so I was deathly afraid of going into the jungle. I went and enlisted in the Navy. So instead of 2 years in the jungle, I spent 4 years on a ship to save my legs, so to speak. Uh, but when I left, my mother, she hit the ceiling. She lost her mind. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? What have you done? Well, I just handed it over to my brother. I said, here it is. It's all yours now. And when I came back from Vietnam, I wanted nothing to do with deaf people. Nothing. I wanted to have nothing to do with my parents.
Which is a really hard position to be in. Very
Oh
hard.
yeah, right. So that's and it took me. I drove a liquor truck. I'm 5'6", 130 pounds, soaking wet, and I'm taking liquor and I'm going down the steps of a restaurant because I would do anything. Because my mother would say, you know, there's a profession now. You can be a sign language interpreter. You can. I didn't want to have anything to do with it until I finally was convinced one day because I was breaking my back as a laborer uh, and a failed actor as well, and a rock and roll singer. None of which my parents could understand why I was trying to do that. Why don't you just be a sign language interpreter? And so I discovered that world, and I helped or I facilitated communication between a young man who wanted to be an electrician. And so I was a sign language interpreter, and he aced. He was number one in his class. He aced everything, became the greatest electrician that ever lived, as far as I'm concerned. And when I found out that I could do some good with that, then I started warming up to the idea. And the rift between me and my parents in the deaf world kind of eased up a little bit. But I, you know, when you're leaned on for information and then put in this place of responsibility, you don't want to mess up in the middle of a negotiation when it's about money.
You know, you certainly don't. Do you think, Paul? I mean, what kind of age were you when if you like that distance was there with you and your parents?
When I got back from the war, I was about 24 years old and just very miserable and had some addiction problems that I picked up over there. I was not in a good place. I also knew what we had done there was wrong. I um, became aware of it while I was there.
Yeah. Do you think it was probably a stage of your life as well
Yeah.
where most youngsters, if you like, and I can say youngsters now because we've all excuse me, we've all started to get a little older, that we're trying to find our own identity,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
think as well, being that bridge between two worlds. There's a question of identity there. Who am I? I'm somebody in this world. I'm somebody in that world. The two, if you like, the deaf world and the hearing world, and that place in between
Yes.
as a coder.
Who am I? Who am I? What do I? Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there was that I was struggling with. Didn't want to know the answers probably, uh, but so when I finally years and years and years later, this is horrible that you when you think about how easy I could have made it on myself, because I knew there was a group of coders that were getting together. When I left Chicago in 1989, there was a small group of coders that were getting together. And to me, it was a cry session. You get to cry about our parents, and you get to throw shit out there about how bad it was for us, which I just told you how stressful it was. But I didn't realize years later, a very good coder friend of mine told me that it wasn't a crying session, that it was a celebration. What are you talking about? A celebration of what? Well, I went and I found a family of men and women that experienced exactly what I experienced, and to different degrees and different experiences, but exactly what I experienced. And now I can't get enough of this interpreter, Catherine, on the screen. I can't get enough of her when I see her. I can't get enough of I have friends all over the world now that are Codas that had that experience. So it was definitely a healing for me to meet all these other men and women of all ages, of all races, of all creeds that had, just like my father said, oh no, he's deaf. He's not black. I go, oh no, Catherine is no ordinary person. She's a coda. She has my experience.
And it's interesting from what little I've seen. I've worked with, if you like, trained interpreters and
Yes.
also coders who are interpreters.
Yes.
And
Hey,
it's just very interesting for me to feel the difference between the two.
yes.
But I just want to draw a parallel. Paul Preston, in his book, the one thing that leaps out consistently in it is the almost like the kinship as he's interviewing or having conversations, researching
Yes,
uh,
yes.
with members of the deaf community and coders, just sharing of the experiences. And there's almost like this, it is finding your tribe. It's the familiarity. It's things don't need explaining. And what struck me more than anything was the trust that people had in him because he understood, because he was like them. And it was almost at one point, and I could feel that the tension in the room in some of the conversations that he recounts in the book, of you could almost feel the person leaning in. Can I tell you something? Because they'd never vocalized those feelings before.
Yes.
And that's it just I suppose, again, as I said to you at the beginning, I'm on this uphill fast track learning, and it's reinforcing how little I know, but also how little, if you like, if I'm representative of the hearing world, how much we need to essentially do our work. We think we're being inclusive, but we're not. We're it's a kind of lip service that makes
Oh,
us feel better.
absolutely.
And
Yes.
as I think I just before we started to record, I was telling you about a wonderful Irish family who, the Helen and Andrew, the parents, have just been telling their story. They're invited to tell their story on the national TV and radio network. But of the two boys, and the boy who, the two boys, Callum and Donica, and Callum is the deaf twin. And as he said, it's it's I'm deaf. That's the only difference.
Right.
And ISL is it's a language. You could
Yeah.
speak it,
Right. Right.
and it was just it's just to hear a young child saying that, and just saying, if you really, if you could learn my language, then we could talk. And the implication then is that we could be friends, we could communicate. But I'm excluded from your world, but you can be part of my world too.
Right.
And I think he's really, um, as I say, out of the mouths of babes. I think just in that total innocence, just wouldn't it be lovely if we could talk? So I'm hoping things will change and people like me learn how to engage better, or engage full stop. Engage better comes. We're scared of getting it wrong, Paul. That's the problem.
Oh well, I know. I know. What I mean, but it's just what you're talking about with this little boy is, you can imagine my father growing up in the 50s, the 40s, and just being excluded from, and this is for your life. You're not going to be able to get the same job opportunities that the other hearing man gets. That's it. That's it. And he spent his whole life that way. And anytime he tried to make himself better himself and climb a rung up the ladder, he had to do it through the hearing man. I learned very early on to not trust the hearing man. When he told me not to interpret for my father, I was like, well, I can't trust you now because you're a shit. You're trying to put one over on, just like my dad told me. Don't trust the hearing man. So it's a huge mountain to climb. Things are better nowadays, yes, because we have communication, we have devices that we can use to text, and yes, that's all a lot better. Education is better. Codas don't have the life I had today. There's a profession called interpreters that can use them, employ them. But there's still that feeling. I just read that book again a month ago because I had to do I read it probably once every 2 years just to get that feeling. And you're right, it is a very uh, right. He did get the trust of everybody. That's so clear in the book.
Mm.
There's who else can I talk to about this?
Yeah.
And now I find myself going to a Coda convention. I don't have to talk about it. I
Yeah.
can just be with these people. All I have to do is be with them,
Yeah.
and it's understood. So this is what you're talking about. I think is you you can't if you can't sign with somebody, or if you can at least expand the awareness so the consciousness can grow. Expand the awareness in another person's life. But do you realize what it is for this person to, when people find out that I'm in a Black Sabbath tribute band and that deaf people, I do it in sign language, and deaf people come to watch the show. What are you saying? What? I thought they were deaf. Well, then there's a whole level and layers of deafness that you're not getting. They're not allowed to enjoy music. Well, they're deaf. I know, but they can feel, they can see the stories, they can feel my energy when I'm going crazy up there, acting like a madman, whatever the hell's going on. Why should they be denied that? They don't want to be denied that. They want to be part of pop culture, but they're denied that simply because of the isolation of deafness. It's nothing that you did. It's just hearing people just move along. Hey, we're doing our thing. Isn't music wonderful? Why should a deaf person enjoy it? Well, be aware that they do.
And it's feeling the vibration as well, isn't it, in music?
It's all of it can be all the vibration,
Yeah.
watching me mouth the words, signing the stories, the drummer going crazy. It's crazy. But my mother loved pop culture, but she was not included. She would watch the television. Elvis Presley was on Ed Sullivan years ago. I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but when he first came on television, my mother's like, "Is he good? Is he singing good?" I said, "Oh, I love him." When the Beatles came, my mother bought my first ticket to go see the Beatles. She paid for the tickets, bought my first guitar. She wanted to know about the Beatles, but she could not hear them. But she wanted to know about the Beatles. Why? Why were they singing about? Love. They're singing about love, Mom. That's all.
Which brings us back to, if you like, for me, if you want to redefine love, it is what we do in our everyday life.
Absolutely.
It's not just the one-on-one relationship with a significant other. It's how you live your life. It's how you connect with other people. It's Love is far, far bigger. And I
Way,
think
way bigger.
through being more careful and considerate, we can definitely make this a better world. I mean, people spoke about what did the pandemic do for everyone. Well, it brought out possibly true colors in people.
Mm.
It it showed us that we have no control. And when people say now, we're getting back to normal, and again, it was a young child who I don't know, he was 8 or 9, and he said, "I don't want things to go back to normal. I want things to go to better." And I thought,
Wouldn't that be
kid,
nice?
you've got it in one. It's a
Right.
better world we want, a kinder world.
Right. You're right. Oh God, I don't want it to go back to normal. I want it to because whatever the new normal is, and as I said, that word expansion, expand the awareness. Uh, we have to expand that.
Yeah.
So when deaf people are together in their own little world, well, they're the happiest people in the world. Oh God, just like Codas, when we get together, we're the happiest people in the world, you know. But if you make a gesture to a deaf person to try to communicate gesturally somehow, make a picture in the air, they light up because, oh my goodness, a hearing person's making an attempt.
Yeah.
That's a big thing.
But I think also what people tend to forget is, it's a little bit like whether it's, I suppose, the first time I went to Italy, and people were very warm because I learned baby words, if you like, just because I felt very rude not being able to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was brought home to me the first time I met and properly met a deaf person, which was Joanne Chester, the girl I was talking about earlier. And my first thought on meeting Joanne was, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to communicate with a deaf person. And the first words that I said, well, I'm sorry. Because suddenly it brought home to me that I hadn't a clue. And she made it so easy for me.
Mm.
Straight away, she put me at my ease, and through gestures. And this is my undertaking, Catherine, that I want to start learning, even just the basics, to be able to do a little more than to say thank you.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, stuff like that goes a long way. They really appreciate that. And they are very, deaf people are patient because that's almost in their nature because they have to be to get through this world that we've created here together. Uh, I mean, the hearing world. You know, uh, as I said, the deaf world is responsible for making this world the way it is. Also, so there's the good and the bad.
Mm.
Not to say that all deaf people are patient. I've met there's some people out there that don't have time for as soon as they I know a lot of guys that are deaf guys that will go, oh, he's hearing, they just blow him right off, gone, he's out, because
So
what's he going to
it
do for
works
me?
both ways. It
It
works
works
both
both ways.
ways.
It does. It works both ways.
I mean, as a parent yourself, and having grown up within a very different world, what advice would you give to parents, both deaf parents, but also um, parents of a deaf child?
Hmm.
What advice would you give them?
I don't know if I've got any advice that I would find worthy, but I can tell you my experience. And my experience is when I became a father, I just decided right away that uh, we were going to find a community for her to grow up in where she would be understanding of all cultures. And so we did that. We joined an international spiritual community. It was diverse as hell, just diverse. And so and we always just wanted to tell her to respect other cultures, including deaf culture. And so, I would hope that by now we've gotten rid of this. When I was a little kid, there was you couldn't sign in public. It was rude. People made fun of you. I would hope we're over that now. I think we are. But the one thing that I wish that I had known better when I was a kid, that signing is beautiful and we should all just sign out in public. And yeah, my parents are deaf. But instead it was a negative experience. And we have this joke at Codas. If you get up and you address the audience, and you, hi, my name is Paul, my parents are deaf. We have this private joke with the whole audience of Codas go, oh, oh, that's what I heard my whole life. And so we joke about it now. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's nothing to be, so people that have a deaf child, I think when you have to dive in, you have to be all inclusive. And if you have deaf parents, it's the same way, although for some people it can be different. It can be daunting. But all I can say is everybody needs to be respected, everybody. And I'm not just talking about deaf people. I'm talking about any kind of culture,
Yeah.
any kind of If there's a struggle, a challenge that a person's going through physically, whether it be having to be a wheelchair user or blind or whatever else is going on, cerebral palsy, there's so much misunderstandings about what is happening. You can ask the person. That's why I have to be very careful. People ask me about deaf people. I say, don't stop asking me about deaf people. I'll tell you about codas. If you want to ask something about deaf people, ask that deaf person right over there. They're right there. I'll facilitate communication, but ask them. I don't know how they feel, but I can certainly
Yeah.
interpret for you, you know.
So essentially, don't for somebody, if you like, from the hearing world like me, who is learning, just jump in, just
Just jump in and, you know, just try not to be too judgmental about it. You just have to have an open mind. Try to take the blinders off and like look around. That's a wonderful thing when you're made aware of things that you are not made aware of. But some people, yeah, when you get into issues like LGBTQ and stuff, you can't change anybody's mind sometimes. But so there are things you can't even approach, but you can certainly try and in your own little groove of the world here, try and expand it. Can't you?
you can, because there's a whole world of richness there, and
Oh,
that's what I've discovered.
I love that
Absolutely,
word. I love that word too. How rich it is. How rich
it
indeed it
is.
is. Absolutely.
Yeah. Paul, thank you hugely for talking with me tonight. I really appreciate it, and to have shared some of my thoughts and learned from you. Thank you.
Absolutely my pleasure. It seems like we're only sitting here for 5 minutes, although Catherine is all worn out. She does lovely work.
And of course, thank you to Catherine White, as ever, for interpreting for me. Thank you. Thank you to you both.
Thank you, Janie.